Welcome and ni hao. My name is Larry Kunz, and thank you for attending today's webinar, How to Grow in the Technical Communication Profession. This is the first in a series of webinars that SDI will present over the coming months, designed to help those of you, especially who are new to technical communication, have just entered the profession in the last few years. But I think even those of you who have been working in this field for a while will find that these webinars are helpful. Today's webinar will last approximately 40 to 45 minutes, and then there will be time for question and answer at the end. You are free to submit questions at any time using the chat box in your GoToWebinar screen, and I will check those questions and respond to them partway through and then again at the end. So please use the chat box when you have a question or a comment about something. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Systems Documentation, or SDI, the company for which I work. SDI is a global company in the information engineering industry. The company was founded in 1978, so this year is our 35th anniversary. And although we are based in the United States, we've been since 2008 a global player with offices in Europe, India, and in China. We have commercial clients around the world. We also do work for the United States government, and we do consultancy work as well. Besides just producing technical communication content, we also work with companies and other organizations to enhance the processes that they use to produce quality technical documentation. Our primary offerings, as I mentioned, are documentation and also a very complete suite of training products that we deliver. We use a software as a service mechanism called Ateneo, which provides the entire workflow from beginning to end through content creation, editing, review, translation, and publication. And finally, as I mentioned, we provide consultancy services in the areas of information systems and architecture, technical communication tools and workflows, as well as process discovery and improvement, helping companies examine their processes and find weaknesses and strengths and make the processes work better. SDI in China was established 2 years ago in 2011, and many of you I know are familiar with SDI. We have offices in Beijing and Shanghai. Our business focus currently is on telecommunication and manufacturing. We provide a full range of services for local clients, that is, companies located in China. SDI in China is not an offshoring concern. We do not do work for foreign companies using workers in China, but instead we do work for Chinese industries. Our strong focus is on content creation using DITA and XML. This webinar will not delve deeply into DITA and XML. If you don't know what they are, that's okay. Very briefly, DITA is an XML-based standard that is used to develop technical communication content. Its strengths are that the content can be better structured and better organized and also reused. So the same piece of content, for example, can be part of a user manual or a web help or a training component or many other kinds of documents. The savings in efficiency and also the savings in translation are noteworthy, and so we are very strongly emphasize the DITA scheme. We also provide training and growth opportunities continually for our own staff to enhance each staff member's skills and expose them to the latest authoring technologies so that our people are up to date and current in the best tools and the best practices. And one of SDI's bywords is we are second to none. We do not compromise on quality. We certainly look for efficiency. We look for better ways to do things. but never at the expense of the quality of the information or the quality of the processes. So that in a nutshell is SDI China. As I said, I know that many of you are already familiar with SDI. For those of you who are not familiar, I look forward over the coming months and years to get to know you and have you become familiar with us. A little bit about me. I have worked in technical communication for almost as long as SDI has existed, for more than 30 years, not quite 35. Primarily during that time, I've been a writer, editor, project manager, and information designer for software documentation. However, I have done other kinds of documentation as well. I worked in marketing for a number of years and produced documentation from a marketing point of view, which was really an interesting experience because the audience for that information and the parts of the sales workflow that it supports were entirely different at that time. And one of the interesting things, by the way, about our profession is that there's a blurring of the lines now between the technical content and the marketing. They're coming together and converging. And that's where something like DITA comes into play, especially because it allows us to reuse content. I did mention a moment ago that I have done a good bit of project management. I teach a course in project management at one of the local universities, and I'm also involved in the consulting activities that SDI does with its clients. Finally, I'm a longtime member of the Society for Technical Communication, an organization that I hope you're all familiar with. And a few years ago, STC honored me by electing me a fellow of the society. Here's what we'll cover today in our webinar. And the picture shows the very early stages of growth, a little seedling. And we'll see later that it grows into a big tree. We'll talk briefly about the profession itself and what's happening in the profession and some of the opportunities it provides. We'll talk about growing. And we'll explore the question of why do you want to grow? You come to work every day and do your job. Why is it a good thing to grow? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about ways to grow, specifically in technical communication. And if I've convinced you that growing is a good thing, then we'll talk finally about how to get started. What are the first things you need to do? And lastly, as I mentioned, I'll handle your questions. So please, again, feel free to use the chat window to enter those questions. Let's look at the profession. A few things about the profession. It's exciting. I admit that's not a word people usually think of first when you ask them about technical writing or technical communication. But in the decade of the 2010s, technical communication is an exciting place to be. Certainly if you enjoy helping people do their jobs more easily, if you enjoy the act of explaining something useful or helpful, or if you enjoy communicating important information to other people, then this is an exciting place to be because there are so many ways that we can do this and new ones coming along all the time. And that's why I say the profession is changing fast. Certainly when I began more than 30 years ago, we primarily, almost exclusively, wrote manuals. A while after that, we saw the evolution of on-screen help and then help systems that were actually integrated with products. But in the last 5 to 10 years, the number of avenues by which we communicate with our audiences has expanded greatly and is continuing to expand, and it's changing very, very fast. We now, of course, communicate via social media. Mobile devices are coming into play, and there's a very rich untapped area of opportunity there. Not only are we supporting different platforms for delivering our information, we're also supporting different kinds of industries, different kinds of information needs. So if you're part of the technical communication profession, there are a lot of new things coming along and new opportunities, and that should not be frightening. You can master the tools and the skills you need to keep abreast. The exciting part is you get to be part of designing the solutions of how we best use these new media to communicate with all of these different new audiences. People who enter the technical communication industry, I should say profession, come in from many different ways. Some begin their careers as technical communicators. They may major in English, and if you are an English major, then technical communication is a very good fit with the skills that you received during your training. Or you have perhaps you majored in a technical subject, such as engineering or programming. And now you're looking for a way to be active in that subject matter field, but not necessarily in the development area. Technical communication gives you that opportunity, and many people come out of college as English majors or as technical majors and become technical communicators. Some of you perhaps had other areas of concentration in college, but took a few courses in technical communication and got to learn a little bit about what the profession is like, and it seemed like a good opportunity. So many people who come into technical communication do so to begin their careers. But I would guess that even more, and this has historically been true for as long as I've been around the profession, even more people come in at mid-career, changing from other professional endeavors into technical communication. They may change from a technical field such as, again, engineering or programming. They may also change from a field such as localization and translation. Probably if I were to poll you, each of you would have your own unique story of how you came to be in the profession. One of the great things about technical communication is that the skills it requires are skills that people develop in lots of different ways, either in school or in their professional lives, so that when you come into technical communication, you are able to do the work and meet the challenges with the skills that you have. If you are changing careers, if you've been a professional for a while, it's likely that you've had contact with technical communicators, have worked with them, and know something of what their world is like. And I hope that this webinar and the ones to be presented in the future will give you a much broader and deeper picture of what that world is like. So before I tell you how you can grow as a technical communicator, I think I need to answer the question of why should I grow? Why is it important to grow in this profession? Isn't it enough after I've entered the profession to simply do the work, learn the tools and processes that I need, and go about my way? But growth is very important. For one thing, it will give you the skills that you need to gain and then hold good jobs. And the good jobs of today are not the same as the good jobs 5 years and 10 years from now, because the profession is changing so much. We'll need to be constantly keeping up with the tools and the processes and the best practices. And by growing in the profession, you develop those skills and you keep abreast and you experience that growth. You become, for example, a better writer, but you also develop what we call soft skills. And by that I mean skills like how to work on teams or how to negotiate with a subject matter expert. Not the things you would necessarily learn in a college course, but things that are so important in pretty much any job that you'll take. Another advantage of growing in the profession is that you develop a reputation. You make a name for yourself. People know who you are. When you go to apply for a job, it's a great advantage if you already have some stature in the profession and people know you, both the people who might hire you and also people who can recommend you to those who are hiring. Third, and finally, why grow? You'll understand the landscape better. You'll keep up with what's going on in technical communication. You'll know what the important issues are. You'll know about, for example, the new media. You'll know some of the tools and how they compare with each other. And because of that, you'll be able to see the opportunities that are available to you in this changing profession and be able to reach out for those opportunities and consciously move forward in your career. And what are those opportunities? Here are some of them. Writing, of course, is the one that we always think of in technical communication, and it's still a very important one. But technical communication is a diverse enough field that you can pick out the things that interest you the most and build your own career. And they might be some of the things here on this list, or they might be other ones that I haven't listed here. Again, writing is the most basic one that we all think of first. That simply means creating the content. Editing is a good professional skill to have. There are fewer jobs as editors than there were probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, although there are still some. But there are many jobs that demand skills in editing, even if that's not your primary focus. So you can certainly set yourself up as a writer who is also able to edit for the team or perform editing duties for the marketing department or the subject matter experts. So editing is a skill that, even though it may not be your primary job, it's one that can help you land a job and help you keep a job, because it's a skill that a lot of people don't have, and so that gives you an edge. Information architecture is an emerging part of technical communication. And what do I mean by information architecture? Those are the people who design how the content will look, who select the best output formats, who make the decisions about which devices will we write and create the content for. Is it mobile devices? Is it tablets? Is it traditional on-screen help? Perhaps even PDF or printed manual? Selecting those output formats and then figuring out which tools and which processes should be deployed to support the design and the output format that's been selected. Information architecture, or you might also hear it called information design, will probably be an area where there are lots of opportunities in the future. And if that's something that interests you, that would be a real good area to focus on growing in. Project management, of course, I had to mention that. That's something that I do a good bit of, and that is always going to be a skill that's in demand in technical communication. There are a lot of challenges in project management that didn't exist a few years ago, one of which is one that you're probably familiar with, and that's working on worldwide teams. You may work with us in a situation where your subject matter experts are in a different part of the city or in a different city altogether, perhaps even a different time zone or a different country. And so the project manager has to know how to tie together the people on the team, and also needs to work with the information architect to make sure the right tools and processes are in place to make the project work. And if managing people and managing projects is interesting to you, that's certainly an area where you can grow. And as I said, it's going to be in demand for the foreseeable future. And then there are other areas. For example, graphic artists, marketing specialists, people who specialize in producing documents that are used in the initial marketing and sales phases. Web designers is another example. And I'm sure there are more that some of you can think of and some of you perhaps are active in that I haven't mentioned here. So many, many different opportunities in the profession. You'll want to pick the ones that appeal to you, and again, build your own career using those and make sure that you focus on growing in those areas. So we've covered how to grow. Let's talk now about why to. We talked about why to grow. Let's talk about how to grow. And that will be the remainder of this presentation. 4 key areas I want to cover today in terms of how to grow in technical communication. First is build a network. Second is to keep up with the profession, know what's happening, know what the trends and issues are. Third is to handle problems in the work where you are now. And fourth is gain experience, and that sounds kind of general, but I do have some specific things in mind when I say gain experience. So we'll look at each of these in turn now, starting with building a network. When I say build a network, what I mean is build a group of professional colleagues and friends who know you, who know your skills and abilities, who've worked with you, who can help you when you need something, when you need a favor, when you need to know something about a tool or a product that you have to work on, or when you need to get in touch with somebody. Build that professional network of people. You know them, and of course they know you. How do you do that? Join a professional society, and of course the one I always lead with is STC, Society for Technical Communication. It is a wonderful organization. It's also not the only professional society in technical communication, but it is a very good one, and I know that it's working to establish a greater presence in China, and hopefully within not too long a time there will actually be a chapter formed in China. But in the meantime, you can affiliate with STC. It's an international organization, and become a part of it and start building your network that way. I have a slide at the end with a list of resources, including the web address for STC, if you're interested in that. I will have that at the end of the slides. But don't just join the society, become active in it. And when I say that, I don't mean you have to become the president of your chapter or anything like that. Start small. Do something that's comfortable for you. Every organization needs volunteers to do small jobs, such as organizing conferences. Many of those jobs are short-term. You get to do something that isn't a long-term commitment. It's not going to consume a lot of your time and resources. You'll almost certainly get to work with other people and build relationships with them. And then after it's over, hopefully you think that was a good experience and I'm willing to do something like that again. And that's how you become active and then become more active. Why is this a good thing? Well, as I mentioned, people get to know you and you get to know them. You also learn more about the organization. And as I said, if it goes well, and it usually does, you can increase your level of involvement and get to know more people, get to work on more things. Ultimately, you develop skills, good, useful, marketable skills that you wouldn't have in your regular job. And you also develop a sense of satisfaction for having been a part of what the organization is doing. Attend events, such as conferences and even such as webinars like this one. You get good information that you can use on the job. You'll also learn about the bigger questions, the trends and issues that are facing the profession. You find out who the thought leaders are. They're usually the ones who are making the presentation. When you're at events, you get to meet other people who are like you, who share the same interests professionally, perhaps have some of the same questions, but also who know contact people and have access to information that you can use. And of course, you also meet people who might be potential employers. So make sure that you bring your resume or your business cards when you attend an event. And lastly, to build a network, go online. Use social media. You can start by searching on Baidu for technical communication or technical writing or similar things, and find the information that's out there. I strongly encourage every one of you to use LinkedIn if you're not already on. It's a professional networking society where you put your professional credentials and experience out there, and other people do the same. You network with them, and there are also excellent groups on that LinkedIn where they have discussions about things of interest that can help you in your job. Weibo is a good social network, and you can use that also to keep in touch with people, perhaps people you've met in conferences or when volunteering. And QQ, similarly, for conversing and staying in touch with other professional colleagues. These are all ways, social networking, to make a name for yourself and build a professional network. Get to know those other people and have them get to know you. The second way to grow in technical communication is to keep up with the profession. Remember that picture of the seedling I showed you earlier. Now we can see that they've grown. It's grown into a big tree, in fact, several big trees. And this is the kind of growth that happens as you keep up with the profession. Certainly one way to do that is by building and maintaining your network. Other ways to keep up is to read articles and blogs. And a great many of these are on corporate websites, so they're available worldwide. And again, at the end of the presentation, I have on the resources page, I have a link to a page on the SDI website that lists some of my favorite blogs where you can read some of our thought leaders and what they have to say about tools and techniques that can help you in your work, as well as trends and new ideas for technical communication as it moves into the future. As you read these blogs, as you go to these corporate sites, you can go also to the sites for tools manufacturers like Adobe and get yourself on email lists so that you receive email notifications about conversations that are going on, about events that you can attend or webinars that you can listen to. And do participate in the webinars. Most of them are free of charge. They're often publicized in the blogs and the email lists as well as in LinkedIn groups. They are free of charge. I admit that many of them are in the United States time zone, so they may not be so convenient, but that does not need to be an obstacle because you can register for the webinar and then either join during the evening or download the recording after the webinar is over, and you'll be able to see the presentation and hear what was said. So look for webinars and participate in them. And again, I'm very glad that you're participating in this one, and I look forward to your participation in future SDI webinars as well. Here are some LinkedIn groups. There's the primary address for LinkedIn, and these are some of the groups that exist out there where good conversations are taking place. And most of them, any member can post a question or a link to an article that they've written and receive comments, feedback, and many of these conversations will inform you as to what's going on and give you a really good idea of what's happening in the profession and who the top people are. Third way to grow is to tackle problems that come up right where you are, right where you're working today. Don't shy away when these problems or issues come up. Instead, meet them head on. You'll become known as someone who likes to handle problems, who does not shy away. That's a good way to be known. You'll also learn the problem-solving skills that you'll need no matter what you do in your future career. Some examples of problems or situations that I have in mind, learning new tools, processes, or domains. Change always happens. They might come in and announce that the tool you've been using is being replaced by another tool. Well, jump on that. Learn the other tool. Now you'll know two tools, and you'll be able to expand that knowledge as you use other tools as well. The new tools will probably expose you to the latest technologies. For example, mobile platforms. You may be asked to be involved in a new process. If you're in software, you might have heard of agile programming, for example. This offers challenges to the traditional model for technical communication, but it also offers some really good opportunities to work in a way that our work product is really well tailored to the audience. So embrace it. Don't try to avoid it. In any work situation, at one time or another, you'll have to deal with people who are unhappy or disruptive, maybe uncooperative. You need to learn how to get along with them. You don't have to become their friends, but you will have to learn how to work with them and get from them the things that you need or the information that you need. So by developing that skill, again, you've grown in a way that will benefit you no matter what you do for the rest of your career. You may be in a situation where you work without a designer or an editor. Ideally, these two skills are present on your team. You have someone who specializes in these things and is good at it, but that's not always the case. So you may volunteer to edit some of the documentation. You may learn design principles and start contributing to the decisions about formats and tools and processes. This can be hard in the short run. It's quite challenging, but in the long run, you'll have developed skills, again, that you'll be able to call on as you move through your career. And you'll be able to put them in your CV and say, I've done this, when you're looking for a new job. Finally, sometimes ethical questions come up. And by that, I simply mean, what's the right way to do business and what's not the right way? And you want to hone your sensitivity to business ethics and be able to recognize situations where there is a right way and then pursue that right way. Similar to that, but not exactly the same, are questions about best practices. How do I best do something? These are the kinds of situations, the kinds of problems that we want to be able to handle in our work. They don't seem like a good thing when they come, but they can be a good thing if we embrace them, if we step forward and deal with them. We will grow and we will learn things that are very valuable. Here's some tips for handling problems at work. Use that network that you've built. Use your professional society. Call on your colleagues and say, have you ever dealt with a situation like this? Have you ever heard of this new tool? How can you help me get training in it? Things like that. People in professional societies almost all of the time are happy to answer questions, so don't hesitate to call on them, whether in person or by email or on a LinkedIn group or any other social media. The professional society will also give you access to magazine articles and journal articles where you can read about people who've dealt with the same kind of problems that you're facing and see what they did. And of course, if you work for SDI or you work with SDI, remember that we are a worldwide company and we have people all over the world who are knowledgeable and experienced, and we are happy to work with you to improve your processes and advise you when these problems come up. Finally, the last way to grow is to gain experience. If you're working in a job and you find a better job, I would advise you to take it. It doesn't have to be the perfect job. It doesn't have to be your dream job. But if it's a job that can broaden your skills and improve your qualifications and get you closer to the things that you're interested in, that's a good fit. Don't be afraid to step out and gain that experience. Or stay with the employer where you are and ask your manager for work that will help develop those skills that you're most interested in. Another way to gain experience, which I didn't write here, is to download tools. And many of the tools that we work with, like FrameMaker, have free downloads. You can go to adobe.com and download a trial version. It usually expires in 30 days, but that's enough time for you to work with the tool, become familiar with it, and develop that skill that you didn't have before. Finally, look for opportunities outside the business world. Open source projects are always looking for people to write documentation, either specifications or user documentation. When I say open source, this is software that is available on the web free of charge, and it's created and maintained by communities or consortiums of people who share a common interest. A couple that I've mentioned here, DITA, which I mentioned earlier, it's an XML standard specifically for technical documentation. And many of you have also heard of GNU, GNU, which is an operating system similar to Unix, open source, so it's downloadable for free, and you are welcome to become part of these communities that develop it and that are always looking for people to write. Another way to find an opportunity outside the business world is to assist with research projects, perhaps at your university. See if there are professors who need reports written, grant proposals, that sort of thing. And of course, by volunteering in your professional society, as I mentioned earlier, you can find opportunities to develop the specific skills that you want to grow in. So I've given you a lot of different ways to grow. I've talked about networking. I've talked about communicating and building, keeping up with the profession. I've talked about handling problems at work. I've talked about gaining this kind of experience. That sounds like a lot, So how do I start? Well, I think you should start simple. Don't try to do everything at once. Start with one or two easy things. Look for something you can do today, starting now, in the situation where you are. Maybe something you've been putting off. For example, learning a new tool. Maybe you've been meaning to download the free 30-day trial, and you just haven't gotten around to it. Maybe someone at your job is looking for an editor, and you're the right person to step up and take that position and start editing your colleagues' documents. So do one or two things that are fairly easy, and you'll find out that you feel good about that, and then you'll want to move on to other things. So next, I would recommend that you develop a personalized long-range plan in which you ask yourself the questions you see here. In what areas do I need the most growth? Is it information architecture? Is it writing? Is it tools? Is it project management? Is it something else? What steps can I take to grow in those areas? And when should I take them? Which ones can I take in the near term, say in the next 6 months? Which ones should I plan to take over a longer term, 3 to 5 years? Do I need help? And if so, who can give it to me? This is where you call on your network. Maybe a friend can teach you a software tool. Maybe you can find a way to attend a conference. Many times they're located in the cities, and I know that many of you work in the cities, so transportation and lodging costs are not necessarily an issue. If you can get to a conference, even a one-day event, you'll find people who can help you grow in the areas that you've identified in your plan. Your plan should be unique to you. Make sure that it's yours. Tailor it to fit your needs and your interests. Don't just do what you think you ought to do or what you have seen someone else do. But make sure that it's yours. That way, of course, it'll do you the most good, but you'll also feel good about it, and you'll be motivated to make the plan work. So I encourage all of you to get started with something fairly small, fairly short term, and then make that plan over the next week or month or so. Put that plan together and identify the areas where you can take concrete steps to grow in the profession according to your interests. I promised you a list of resources, and here it is. Of course, these slides will be available later after the webinar, so if you don't get all of these, my contact information is at the top, and I welcome emails from any of you. There's the address for STC, the Society for Technical Communication. A list of blogs on sdicorp.com, that's the SDI website. Gilt World has a technical writing session where you can find conversations going on among people in the profession in China. And then LinkedIn groups, of which I displayed a list earlier. There's the link. You do need to be a member of LinkedIn, but membership is free, and I recommend that all of you join LinkedIn if you haven't already, and develop a presence on there. And once you're on, the great majority of the groups are open to anyone. You do not need to be approved or meet any criteria to get into the group. I'll display this resources slide while we do questions and answers in case you want to write anything down. But I also want to mention the next SDI webinar. The topic will be working with subject matter experts. We'll talk about tips and techniques for working with the technical experts on whom you depend for information, including topics like how to build working relationships with subject matter experts, how to prepare for meetings and get the most out of them, and how to conduct reviews of the documentation. The webinar will take place on Wednesday, the 20th of February at 9:30 China Standard Time, the same time as this webinar. And I hope not only to see all of you, but please tell a friend. There's the link to register. And again, these slides will be available later, and you can get that link. So I'm going to finish by displaying the resources chart again. And I want to see if any one of you have asked questions. If any of you have a question or a comment about anything I've said, now is the time. Please use the chat area. Let me ask if you will, please, in the chat box, tell me if you are already acquainted with STC. Are you a member? And have you made any use of STC resources? For example, read the magazine or attended an event, that sort of thing. If you could just put that into the chat box. I want to get a sense of how well you're networked. Also be curious to know whether how many of you are on LinkedIn. And certainly, if you are on LinkedIn, you know that it's possible to send an invitation to another professional, inviting them to connect. And when you're connected, then you can correspond with them more easily and also gain access to the people that they're connected to. So if any of you are on LinkedIn, I'd be interested to know that. And also invite you to connect to me. So I'm seeing a few of you are in STC. Somebody reads my blog. That's very nice. Thank you. A couple in LinkedIn. And a question, thank you. Does STC provide technical documentation to service to Chinese companies in English or Chinese? Right now in English, as we develop a Chinese presence, I say we, I mean STC. As STC develops a Chinese presence, I would anticipate that there will be some Chinese language services as well. But at the moment, it is in English. And I think I see 3 or 4 of you in LinkedIn, so that's really terrific. Question is, how many technical writers are there in China now? Do you have an idea? Gosh, I don't know. And one reason I'm not sure is because it's hard to quantify just exactly what is a technical writer. How many people are actually engaged in producing documentation, either internally or externally? I'm sure it's in the thousands. How many people have had training and are involved in the profession and that sort of thing? Probably a smaller number. I would certainly think it's in the hundreds. It could be in the thousands. But I will tell you this, the number is getting bigger very fast. Okay, question is, what does an information architect do? And how do we grow to be one? The information architect, think of an architect who builds a building. They're the one who defines the structure. We have writers who produce content, we have artists who produce artwork, but somebody has to organize all of that and decide how it's going to be displayed, decide how the different pieces of content are going to relate to each other, and what formats they'll be in. For example, on-screen help integrated with a product, or web-based help, or perhaps help that's transmitted to a mobile device, printed manuals, whatever the right answer is. And then once they make those decisions, they figure out which tools and which processes to use to make those things happen. And I mentioned DITA several times, and that's certainly not an accident that I mentioned DITA quite a lot. It's such an important part of our profession. DITA requires architects to create what they call DITA maps that structure the content in the way that it's going to be presented. And the way to grow to be one, I think, is to start by developing awareness of the different ways to display technical content, both in terms of the devices it's displayed on, but also on how it looks and how it flows and how the pieces are related to each other. And as you develop that awareness, you'll probably see things where you'll say, you know, I would have done something differently. Or I really like that. I think that should be the way I proceed on my project. And as you develop that awareness and that skill, then maybe you can influence projects that you're on and help make decisions about that. Question, is it necessary for a technical writer to master HTML and know how to compile a file with HTML? Probably not necessary to master HTML. Most tools provide what we call a front end. In other words, they don't require you to work with the actual HTML code, but they provide an editing environment. where the code is in the background. It's good to know HTML, especially since HTML is a structured markup language, similar to DITA, where each element has a relationship to other elements and there are hierarchies. It's also good to know HTML because it's ubiquitous. It's all over. But is it necessary to have mastered it? Certainly not. To have a basic working knowledge, I would say yes, it's a very good advantage to have that basic working knowledge. The upcoming webinar topics are oriented towards professional development and growth. The question is, will we talk about DITA? You know what? I think I'll find a way to do that in one of these webinars, probably not the next one about subject matter experts. But I do want to talk about structured authoring. There's quite a bit to say about it. And it's something that I think is a very, very important thing to understand in our profession. So in one of the upcoming webinars, we'll give an introduction to the concepts of DITA, not necessarily the details of how to use it, but the concepts. So I don't see any additional questions. Again, I will post the slides on sdicorp.com by tomorrow. I expect to do that and make them available on SlideShare. And I look forward to hearing from you by email or on LinkedIn or perhaps in a LinkedIn group or through STC. And I also look forward to seeing all of you at next month's webinar on February 20th when we talk about subject matter experts. So thank you all again very much for attending. I hope that you have a good day, and best of luck in your careers as you grow as a technical communicator.